Welcome to TSAT. Today I am going to discuss a topic in geography regarding agriculture. So here in this context, why this part of economic geography known as this agricultural geography or agriculture is being made part of geography. The reason behind it is in the context of agriculture is considered, agriculture is being influenced by certain geographical factors. So, what are the geographical factors which influence the agriculture? Geographical factors like the types of soil, the climatic condition, and topographical features influence the agriculture. So, in this context, climatic factors impact the availability of precipitation or water availability. So, depending upon the availability of the water, the agriculture is being determined in a region. So, apart from the availability of water, even the type of soil also determines the type of crop need to be cultivated. So, all the soils are not equally fertile. You have got alluvial soil, you have got laterite soil, black cotton soil, red soil, sandy soil, desert soil. So, all the different variant types of soils have different variant types of mineral composition and organic composition is not the same, which determines the crop need to be cultivated. So, the second factor after climate, it is the soil which determines the crop in a region. Apart from this, topographical features. So, in a region like Indo-Gangetic Plain where the slope gradient is less, where there is possibility of stagnation of water, you can cultivate crops like wheat or rice, sugarcane. So, these kind of crops can be cultivated. For example, in the hilly slopy regions like the Western Ghats or the northeastern states, we can cultivate crops like cash crops like tea, coffee kind of crops can be cultivated. So here the topographical feature means the difference in the slope gradient. For example, mountain slopes in the Western Ghats and the northeastern states facilitate not only the cool climatic condition, facilitate a kind of well-drained topographical feature which is essential for tea and coffee cultivation. So, let us examine in the case of Indian agriculture how agriculture is being influenced by different factors and how this agriculture is influencing Indian economy is going to be discussed with you. So, in this context, first we need to understand the physiographic features, how they are impacting the Indian agriculture, and the different variant types of soils distributed, how they are being impacting the agriculture. Physiographic features are responsible for a slope gradient and topographical features. For example, in the case of India, so the maps which are being depicted to you or projecting you, showing you two different themes here. One is highlighting the kind of soils. The other is highlighting demarcating the different variant types of topographical features. So, in this context, the map which you have here, major soil types of India. For example, we have got different variant types of soils. For example, black soil. You have got this black cotton soil in this region, which is the resultant of lava flow in this region, the red soil in this region, the alluvial soil here, which is present in the Indo-Gangetic Plain and the coastal regions, east coastal regions, you have got the alluvial soil, and the laterite soil is present on the hilly, higher ridges of mountains or plateaus. Laterite soil is considered to be a poor soil in terms of the fertility of the soil is being considered. So, the desert soils or the sandy soils in the Rajasthan region, on the rain shadow region in the eastern side of the Western Ghats. So, these are the different variant types of soils which are present in different parts of our country. For example, when you relatively compare with the alluvial soil which is present in the Indo-Gangetic Plain and in the coastal plain regions, considered to be a fertile soil, The reason behind it is the resultant of the deposition being brought down by the great river systems like the Indus and the Ganges. In the process of weathering and erosion from the higher elevated regions, they collect the minerals of different variant required nutrients essential are being deposited here, which are being collected from lakhs of square kilometers through the weathering and erosion by the streams which form the river systems, where the minerals are collected from across the mountainous regions. Because of this reason, these alluvial soils are fertile. So, whatever the deficiency the soils are in terms of nitrogen, etc., are being given artificially through fertilizers, through chemical and organic fertilizers. We have the knowledge of supplying the deficit of the soil, so that we will be increasing the nutrition level of the soil. Obviously, the agricultural produce increases. So, here we have different variant types of soils. For example, take the case of laterite soil. Laterite soils are the resultant of a leaching process. Leaching is the process of degradation and draining of the essential nutrients, because they are being dried, heated by the sun's heat, and at the same time they are being drained away by the flowing streams and rivers from the higher elevated regions of the mountains, dissolving the nutrients of the soil, leaving them sterile or infertile. So, but this is a region where we are cultivating certain cash crops like tea, coffee, etc. The reason behind it is the conditions essential to cultivate these kind of cash crops we have got in terms of the temperature, with the lapse rate, with the altitude, in terms of well-drained topographical feature, which is essential for tea and coffee. So, the deficiency is the fertilizer which we are supplying it to the crops. So, because of this reason, we are able to even cultivate cash crops like tea, coffee, etc., pepper, tea, coffee, cardamom, etc. are being cultivated because we are supplying the required essential nutrition. These are the poorest soils, and we are cultivating here the cash crops. So, to know about the Indian agriculture, we need to know about the conditions of the different variant types of soil. And in the Deccan Plateau region, in the Plateau region, Peninsular Plateau region, we have got the black cotton soil, which is the resultant of the degradation of the lava plateau or the igneous rock body. So, it is very famous for the cultivation of cotton, red grams, sugarcane. These kind of crops can be cultivated in these regions. So, the Indo-Gangetic plain, as you know, it is famous for the cultivation of wheat, rice, sugarcane. So, in the desert soils here, in the case of western Rajasthan, where the irrigation availability is very less, because of this we cannot cultivate huge amount of rice and wheat. So, we can cultivate crops which are based on rain-fed irrigation. So, here in this process, what is done is, for example, when even this region, when it is being supplied with irrigation, for example, the classic example is Indira Gandhi Canal, which is being made. So, in this region, the western part of the Rajasthan, because of the construction of Indira Gandhi Canal, which has resulted in increasing in the agricultural activity in this region. So, these are the different types of soils present in our country which are impacting the agriculture. So, what are the different states? What are the different kinds of crops being cultivated? Let us examine on the basis of the variation of different variant types of soils in our country. So, next is topographical features. So, as been depicted to you in the case of the topographical features, for example, you have got the peninsular plateau, the northern plains, the Himalayan mountain regions, the desert regions, the east coast and the west coastal regions are the different physiographic features which we have got in our country. In this context, to understand, we need to understand the slope gradient of these regions. So, as been mentioned, out of all these different features been mentioned to you, here in the case of Himalayan regions, it has got a higher elevation, because of which the water, the perennial river systems flow from the higher elevated regions, from the Himadri Himachals, Shivaliks to the Great Plain regions. The Indus in the Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab region here flows to the west, and the Ganges system flows to the south, meeting the plain here. So, because there is a high slope gradient here, the type of crops being cultivated varies in this region. So, here in the context of topographical features, and the different topographical features are being demarcated here on the basis of the color. So, the violet color region is a higher elevated regions of the mountain regions, which are responsible for creating a kind of slope gradient to the southern parts of the Himalayas. So, the Himadris, the Himachals and the Shivaliks of this region are responsible for the draining of the great river systems like the Indus and the Ganges systems, which flow to the south of Himalayas. So, the Indus to the west into the Pakistan, into the Jammu and Punjab regions, and the Ganges to the plains of UP, Bihar, etc. and Bengal. The Ganges flows towards the east after entering the plain regions. So, in this case, when you are able to relatively compare the altitude of these different geographical features which have been depicted to you, the Himalayan mountains have the highest elevation. Next comes the peninsular plateau regions. The peninsular plateau region is the next elevated region. Between Himalayan physiographic feature and the peninsular plateau region, we have got a low-lying physiographic feature known as the Great Plains region, which is the resultant of the depositional activity being done by the great river systems like the Indus and the Ganges. So, the altitude of the Indo-Gangetic plain is much more lesser than the Himalayas and the peninsular plateau. So, here the altitude is more or less around 50-60 meters, or almost it is zero at the mouth of Ganga and Hooghly. Gradually, when it moves towards the west, the altitude extends up to 150 to 200 meters. But in the case of Himalayas, the greater Himalayas, the lesser Himalayas, the Himadris, the Himachals and the Shivaliks, Himadris have got an elevation of around 5,000 or 6,000 meters on an average. So, 4,000 meters, 3 to 4,000 meters in terms of Shivaliks and Himachals. Shivaliks have got a 2,000 meter elevation. So, obviously, always why the elevation is being mentioned is you will be able to know the reason why the directional flow of a river is being determined. Why this Ganges river system is flowing into northern plains is because of the slope gradient. For example, in the case of the peninsular plateau region, the peninsular plateau region is being divided into northern peninsular part and the Deccan peninsular part based upon the range we have got here. So, Vindhyas and Satpuras, the range is divided. So, the northern part is tilted towards the north, because of which you have the Son or the Beta rivers, which forms the peninsular tributaries of Ganges. But the Deccan Plateau is being tilted from west to east. The slope is towards the east. That is the reason why the Godavari, Krishna, Penna, Vaiga, etc. flow from west to east, because it is a tilted plateau, the tilted lava plateau. So, the elevation of the east and west coastal regions are much more lesser than the peninsular plateau, and these plains are being formed because of the depositional activity being made by these river systems flowing respectively in terms of east and west, where in this region the Western Ghats are acting as a watershed divide. Based upon this, you will be able to know that why these river systems are flowing in a specific direction based upon the slope gradient and elevation. After understanding this, so because these Himalayan mountain ranges as a ridge running across almost all east-west or in this orientation, so northwest or to southeast direction more or less oriented, obstructs the southwest monsoons, because of which you see this kind of a bend we have got in the northeastern part of our country. This bend, hairpin bend of this Himalayan range, traps the monsoons. The Arabian Sea branch of the monsoon and the Bay of Bengal branch of the monsoon is being trapped here, leading to saturation. And this is a region in the world because of this kind of bent, which is responsible for the maximum amount of rainfall in the world. The Mausindram or the Cherrapunji or the regions in Meghalaya, which receives the highest amount of rainfall in the world because of the monsoon wings, the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal branch of monsoons are being trapped here. And we receive the maximum amount of rainfall here in the eastern part of our country. By the time when we gradually move towards the west, the rainfall becomes minimum at the Thar Desert. The maximum is in the northeast, the minimum is in the Thar Desert. And in the same way, here it is being determined by the directional flow of monsoons and the physiographic feature of our country. Apart from this, we have got the Western Ghats here. So, the Western Ghats stop the southwest monsoons. When the Western Ghats stops the southwest monsoons have to cross the Western Ghats here. So, in this process, the southwest monsoons are being subjected to an elevation, and it leads to saturation because of the lapse rate decreasing in the temperature and the addition of water vapor by a continuous flow of wind from the Indian Ocean region, leading to saturation. So, the western side of the Western Ghats receives the maximum amount of rainfall, and by the time the monsoons cross the Western Ghats, by the time they reach the central region of this peninsular region, the wind becomes dry and leading to the formation of a rain shadow region in this. So, whether a vegetation or agriculture is being determined by the availability of precipitation. On the basis of this, the types of crops being cultivated in a region is being determined. So, because the heavy precipitation happens to the south of the Himalayan region, it leads to the formation of a perennial river system because there is a accumulation of snow on the Himalayan regions because of decreasing in the temperature. So, Himalayas receives precipitation in the form of snow in the winter and in the form of rain in the monsoon season, leading to a continuous perennial river systems. That is the reason why in the Indo-Gangetic plain, because there is abundant availability of irrigation throughout the year in the Rabi and Kharif, crops are being cultivated across the Indo-Gangetic plain, extending from the Indus region in the Punjab and the Gangetic plain, UP, Bihar, and the Assam plain, which is being drained by the Brahmaputra. But in the case of the peninsular plateau region, here the river systems are not perennial because they don't have a continuous supply of water, because in the case of Himalayas, the snow melt in the winter feeds the streams, but the snow is absent in the peninsular India in the tropical region. Because of this reason, these rivers are not as perennial as the Himalayan mountain systems. So, these factors of availability of water and the type of soil determines the agriculture in our country. The importance of agriculture in our country is 70% of the rural households are dependent upon the agriculture, and questions can be asked in this way: what is the percentage of contribution of agriculture to the GDP? 17% of the agriculture is contributing to the GDP of our country, and 58% of the population in our country is depending upon agriculture. So, these can be given as a questions. Contribution of agriculture to GDP can be a question. What is the percentage of population depending upon agriculture can be a question. In this process, gradually what happened is, because of different factors, construction of different kinds of projects and improvement in terms of technology, improvement in terms of irrigation technology, fertilizers, pesticides, and different factors, gradually what happened is the amount of agriculture produce has gradually increased to 250 million tons in 2011 and 12. But now after 2020, it has even increased to 280 million tons of food grains have been produced. So, gradually in 1950-51 it is just 51 million tons. In 2011 it has crossed 250 million tons. Now it has reached even 260 to 280 million tons in 2020-21. So, the GDP's contribution has increased to 19.9% in 2021 to which from 17.8% in 2019-20. So, here it implies that there is increasing in the contribution of GDP. But when relatively compared currently, the percentage contribution of agriculture to the GDP, even though the percentage is low, when relatively compared with the secondary sector and the tertiary sector, it doesn't mean that the agricultural produce has been reduced. When there is a percentage comparison of contribution of agricultural sector to GDP and secondary sector and tertiary sector to GDP might be less. But in terms of the total volume of production being made in terms of agriculture from 51 million tons to 280 million tons, in general it has increased, but relative comparison in terms of percentage might be low, but overall production of agriculture has increased. So when a question is being framed, whether he is asking the percentage or in terms of amount, in terms of millions of tons of food grains, be very clear while you are going through the question. So certain data is essential to answer certain questions. India is the biggest exporter of cotton in the world. India is the largest producer of ginger, okra. Okra is otherwise also known as lady's finger in general, potatoes, onions, brinjals, etc. among vegetables. Sikkim has achieved 100% organic farming, might be a question. India ranks second in the world in agricultural production. Agricultural production in overall agricultural production, considering all products, food grains, vegetables, fruits, horticulture, cash crops, everything in total considered. Indian agriculture production has increased from 87 US dollar in terms of billions to 459 US dollars billion in the last 15 years. There is an annual increase of 12% of agricultural production. This might be a question. Anything can be converted into, in terms of amount of US dollars, in terms of billions, the percentage of growth rate of agriculture production can be an objective bit. So it is 12% annual growth rate. Globally, India ranks 9th for the agricultural exports. So in terms of the value, and India ranks 9th in terms of exports of agriculture. A total of horticulture products in 2019-20, it has been increased to 310 million tons. So here horticulture products consists of, there might be certain question in terms of what constitutes cash crops or food grains, cereals, pulses. So in this way, what constitutes horticultural products? Horticultural products especially consists of fruits and vegetables. So 310 million tons in 2019 and 20. In 2019-20, India produced about 24 million tons of onions and exported around 2 million tons for it. So there might be a question in terms of the exports of onions. Potatoes in 2019-20, the production is 51 million tons, and tomatoes it is around 19 million tons in terms of vegetable production. As per estimates, total fresh vegetable production was about 97 million tons, about which 16 lakh tons of it was exported. So any of these data can be converted into a question in terms of lakhs of tons of export of fresh vegetables from India. In 2019, India's livestock population rose to around 530 million, including cattle, buffalo. So all the cattle constitutes of 550 millions, might be a question. India is the largest milk producer and exports milk to these neighboring countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, UAE and Afghanistan. In 2019-20, 190 million tons of milk was produced. In terms of exports, India exports about 11 lakh million tons of buffalo meat, 14,000 million tons of sheep, goat meat and 3.5 lakh million tons of poultry products in 2019-20. So this data can also be used in making an objective bits in terms of Indian agriculture. The current agro crop situation in India. So India is the world's second largest producer of both rice and wheat. Cultivation on 45 million hectares in Kharif and Rabi season. Rice production has continuously risen over years from 1.4 million tons in 2015-16 to 117 million tons in 2019-20. So they may ask you the amount of millions of tons of rice being produced by India in these years. So you must be able to memorize certain data essential to answer certain questions. Wheat, a rabi crop, is planted around 30 million hectares, and its harvest stood around 107 million tons in 2019-20, up to 92 million tons 5 years ago. So in terms of the millions of tons of wheat being produced and rice being produced, you must be able to compare. But in the case of Indian agriculture, in this process of cultivation, there is an increase in invisible costs. So for example, because of improper methods of agriculture being followed, for example, intense use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers, killing the essential microbial biota in the soil, leading to increasing use of chemical fertilizers, increasing the cost, and destructing the quality of the soil is a drawback in the method of agriculture being adopted by us. Encouraged by free power supply and reckless drainage of groundwater, reckless drawing of groundwater for irrigation has resulted in the water table going down to alarming low level. So because of indiscriminate use of water, what is happening is the alarming or the dangerous thing happening is there is decreasing in the level of water table. So significance of agriculture in Indian economy. So agriculture influences on a national income. So it is contributing around certain amount of percentage of GDP, around more than 17 percentage of GDP is being contributed by agriculture. So in the first 2 decades after independence, it has contributed around 48 to 60 percentage to the GDP in terms of the development or the growth of India is considered. Later, even though the percentage is decreasing relatively compared with the rest of the sectors, in general, the amount of agriculture product from the independence decade to right now, it is gradually increasing. So agriculture play a vital role in generating employment because 2/3 of the working population is dependent upon agriculture. Importance and significance of agriculture is it is providing food for ever increasing or exploding population is another significant aspect of agriculture. Agriculture is also responsible for the capital formation. So what do you mean by capital formation? Capital formation means, for example, creation of a kind of essential goods and resources in a country or an economy is known as capital formation. So because we want tractors to cultivate, we need to establish a kind of industries for manufacturing tractors, fertilizers, etc. Certain kind of industries need to be established. So it is impacting other sectors for development, which is being described as contributor for capital formation. Support of raw material to agro-based industries. The supply of raw material to agro-based industries led to the development of industries because of agriculture. So what is it doing is it is supplying raw material. The sugarcane industry can exist only when there is a raw material being supplied from agriculture. Cotton industry, textile industry can survive only when there is cotton being supplied from agriculture. So all these industries are dependent upon agriculture is another significance of agriculture. Market for industrial production. So increase in rural purchasing power is very necessary for industrial development, and 2/3 of the Indian population lives in villages. After Green Revolution, the purchasing power of the larger farmers has increased. So what happened is because the per capita income after the Green Revolution in certain pockets has increased, because of which when their purchasing power has increased because of agriculture, there is increasing in the industrial production. So this agriculture has impacted the secondary sector to develop. Influence on internal and external trade and commerce. So the produce which has been made surplus because of technology has made to increasing in the agricultural products in terms of exports, and distribution of trade across the country has increased. which has led to increasing in the service sectors also. Friends, let us discuss the other topics of agriculture in the next session. Thank you.